to be innovative. And I think that the magic that the restaurant industry touches on from time to time is a magic that the film industry uses really well. This idea of tonal references. The way they're able to sell the same story again and again and again is by putting familiar things together in an unfamiliar. And that feels like innovation, right? So I want to start with the path that led you to Bolay. Because at the end of the day, like I know you had one job and then you had another and then you had another and then you had another and then you were here. And then I'm sure that your dad plays some influence as well. But why you and why this?
Yeah, Josh, Chris Gannon, I was like you, born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana, right? And I think because of that, I was born into the hospitality world. He had fun making people have a good time, the Big Easy. And I knew my mother, they took it so seriously when we had people over to our house. You got a good meal. It was a competitive nature. If your food wasn't good, everybody talked about it the next day. It wasn't like, oh, we had a good time at the party. It's like, no, how was the food? It's a big deal. And I think that's always set into me. And then obviously growing up in the restaurant business, my father achieved some incredible success with Outback Steakhouse, creating the most iconic appetizer with the bloomin' onion. Um, watching him build culture, people, fun, having a good time, and just the energy around the restaurant business and what we're able to do. Yes, it's the hardest business in the world, but I think it's one of the most rewarding businesses in the world. I mean, our job, a great chef told me this, is to just make people happy every day. That's all we have to do. Our job is to make people happy. All right, let's go make people happy. Let's go do some happiness. And that's fun. I enjoy it. And then I remember at a certain point, my father told me, Chris, don't get in the restaurant business, the hardest business in the world. So try to talk me out of it. And I did. I tried to be a professional polo player once upon a time. And I got out of that because you know, being a professional athlete is not easy. It's a long journey. And I went to be a partner at a marketing ad agency, learn about media buying and so on and so forth. And something just kept pulling me back to the restaurant business. And then we became franchisees of a chicken restaurant concept in Florida. And I realized that QSR fast food wasn't for me. I really didn't enjoy the type of demographic we were serving. The product wasn't proud of it. It wasn't speaking to me, to what we were just talking about, and saw some concepts out there. Went to California, spent a couple weeks out there with an incredible architect, and just toured all the bleeding edge concepts. And then on the back of a napkin, created Bolle, the name Olay and bowl, to have fun building a bowl, and used everything I knew. And somehow we had a line out the door the first day and never looked back. And we've made all the mistakes that you can possibly make, and hopefully we're just making great learning lessons, and continuing to get better.
I mean, most concepts fail out the gate, right? So when you look back at the initial launch, what do you think you did well? What are the things that you've doubled down on since then?
Think I had experience, right? I talked to these entrepreneurial classes and kids in college and just want to come right out of school and study entrepreneurship and want to go start a business. I said, hey guys, trust me, I was too. But there's so much more than business than just having a cool idea of a product. You got to know legal, accounting, marketing, hiring, laws, whatever it may be. There's so much to know that you just don't learn that in college, and unless you have incredible resources. And so I always tell kids, young men and women, to really use your 20s to learn on other businesses' dime, and then if you have that bleeding edge to go start a business, then you go start it. Um, I think using all my experience from being a partner at a marketing agency, working at other restaurant concepts. I was in fine dining at True Lux Steak and Seafood, truly learning, ladies and gentlemen, serving ladies and gentlemen. Then I did fast food, and I learned the speed of the drive-through and the importance of just efficiency. And then obviously casual dining at Outback Steakhouse. And when I took all three of those, and I just had this vision of the community table brilliance at Bonefish Grill, and how that brought random people together. So we have community tables in Bolle. The speed of the line, Chipotle, and the efficiencies of that. Comfort, music, feeling, marketing, community involvement that I learned at PDQ. And I think I just took all of those lessons and just somehow just shot from the hip and the gut, and it worked. And I remember every day there was a decision: 12-ounce cup, 14-ounce cup. I don't know, 12. Let's go. Next decision. Now everything's under a microscope and analyzed and data and this and that. It's not as fun now. It was way more fun in the starting days. I can tell you that.
Well, and what was your approach to growth in the early days?
I'll never forget it. I was running Bolay, the original one, and I had an amazing team: Dan Rissick and Justin Brady and Mike Harper and everybody that was just wonderful people that helped get the concept up and running. And I was so focused on the little details of the restaurant, every single thing. And I just remember my father coming in and grabbing my shirt and saying, "Chris, come on, we got to go." I'm like, "No, Dad, I can't leave the restaurant. We're just getting it going." He goes, "Yeah, no, the restaurant's fine. They got this. You did a great job. Let's go look at another site." And he pulled me out, and what it did was it pulled me outside of my comfort zone. And you don't realize how much it's nice to have somebody, like I always say, like a gym coach, right? Or a weightlifting thing. You can do, the first 8 push-ups, but to get that last 2, having somebody kind of encouraging you to get that last 2. And so I look at my father, he was always that pushing me to get those last 2 push-ups, if you will. And so we've got another location, and within 6 months, I still a head scratcher of how we found that location so fast, and got the team together, started preparing restaurant number 2, fixed all the things we would have done, the brand changing up a little bit, and just kept going. I think one of the mistakes, though, and I think it's always good to leave our readers with good lessons to learn from it, is I think innovation is incredible, but I also think we might have over innovated through our journey, going to the restaurant shows and seeing all the new equipment and this and that, and constantly trying new equipment, constantly trying new things. And I look back at all the different restaurants we have, and we're all over the board. And so sometimes figure it out quick and stay with it, and don't, innovation is amazing, but sometimes in our business, you don't need to innovate. You just need to execute. You just need to keep executing and building on your execution. That'd be one of my bigger lessons learned is don't over innovate.
It's interesting you say that. Yeah, Anthony Bourdain has this great quote. He says that consistency is the religion of our industry. And I love that, because I think that when restaurateurs get together, all we really want to talk about is innovation. They're like, the most exciting things to talk about are all of the new things. I was having a conversation with a client yesterday, and she was like, look, I've got this thing that I want to do, and I need to make 15 grand really fast. And she was like, so I had this idea. I was going to do this, and I was going to do that, and I was going to do this. She gave me all these ideas. So let me ask you something. What was the most successful limited time offer you ever ran? And she was like, oh, we did this Kathy roll, and we did it with this stuff inside, and blah, blah, blah. We did like 2 years ago, and it crushed. I was like, why wouldn't you just do that? There's obviously product market fit. It obviously works. And we're always trying to innovate, when the truth is that, like, what people crave is consistency, right? Like, most of the answers to most of the questions, we spend all of this time wandering around, when, like, most of the things, especially when you've had any amount of time in market, can be solved through data. It's just data, and repeating the same shit over and over again isn't fun. It's not exciting, but what it is effective. And so I would ask you, like, as you go through these processes, how do you keep consistency the main thing and not be distracted by innovation over time?
Yeah, well, you're making me reflect deeply on it. I'll never forget when we opened up our first location in Wellington. A food inspector came in, and I obviously loved picking their brain and learning about how we could become safer, better. All the things you learn in food safety. But yeah, hey, Mr. Inspector, tell me what we can do better. And he goes, "Chris, you're about to open your second location. Let me give you some advice. Make it consistent." He goes, "The number one thing I see across brands is consistent." This is a food inspector, right? And I'll never forget, little short guy. I forget his name, and that's stuck with me. And the question is, how do we maintain it? Through systems, processes, checklists, uh, crazy discussions and training on it over and over and over again. And we still make mistakes, though. It's still difficult, right? We're making, you look at And it's a great question because you look at some of these brands that are so consistent and they're so big. Well, how do you become so consistent and so big? You put a lot of things in the food to stabilize it. You make it in factories. You do this other stuff. So maybe there's a little bit of a magic in being a little not consistent restaurant by restaurant. I mean, I just threw that out there. It's a crazy idea, but it proves that guess what? You're scratch made in the restaurant. You're not factory made. You're not preservative laced. I don't know. Maybe just interesting. Against everything I've ever talked about, core beliefs, but think about it.
Well, I would ask, it's so like, I mean, you had a front row seat for Outback Steakhouse, right? And so if like I'm sitting across from your dad and I say, what made it successful? He would have his answer. I would ask you, sitting shotgun through that experience, what do you think made Outback Steakhouse successful?
I think it broke all the rules. When you and I were talking about that, I think that they were so dedicated to the guest experience. I'll never forget. Remember the old days of 2.5 hour lines? Because they were
Yeah.
also the first to market, right? I mean, who had a bloomin' onion for an appetizer? You know, kookaburra wings and cheese fries that were fantastic. I remember my father brought chocolate from Europe. Nobody was doing that. You know, 16 spices in the steak seasoning, and it was uniquely different and it was fun. It was vibrant. The servers would sit down at your table and take your order. They wouldn't even hire me as this founder's son. You had to have worked at another restaurant, three previous restaurants before you could work at Outback. I mean, that's what it was. And so obviously you got the best of the best, the cream of the crop. Managers, it was no rules, just right. They did what they needed to do to take care of the guests. If it wasn't on the menu, they would go to stores and buy it. I mean, there's some crazy stories setting up tables in the parking lot to make sure people were having fun and sit in the back of their car. Just the good old days before, my dad always told me that we missed the fun restaurant days by about 10, 15 years with all the
That's
laws
probably
and
true.
legality and lawsuits that we deal with today. Back then they had fun and when it was fun, when you have a fun work environment, you attract a great team member that wants to be there. And then that fun percolates into the guest experience. I don't know. That's a fantastic question that we need to really reflect on.
Tell you what I like about Outback. And this is what I think is true of all restaurants. Um, I think that nobody actually craves innovation. I think that people drink Red Bull. I don't think they buy those winged squirrel suits in base jump. But when they drink a Red Bull, it kind of feels like maybe they're one of those guys that would do that, maybe, right? And so what I think is, I think that people want to feel innovative. I don't think they want to be innovative. And I think that the magic that the restaurant industry touches on from time to time is a magic that the film industry uses really well. This idea of tonal references. So like every film is the same. It's like boy meets girl or whatever, two best friends go on an adventure, calamity happens. It's always the same story. But the way they're able to sell the same story again and again and again is by putting familiar things together in an unfamiliar way. And that feels like innovation, right? So they don't tell you the plot. They say, this is Bridget Jones' Diary meets Indiana Jones. And those are two things that are familiar to you that, when put together in an unfamiliar way, either it resonates or it doesn't. I would argue that Outback Steakhouse was the first approachable, non fine dining steakhouse. And in doing so, what they said was, they said, this is all of the shit you like to eat in a place that you don't have to feel fancy. And so what they did was, it is those tonal references that put together create a true mode. Um, and I love that, and I look for that in brands, and I work to build that in brands. And so I would ask you about yours, because you guys have achieved scale. And so what are those things for you? What are those familiar things that you're trying to put together in an unfamiliar way? What is your Bridget Jones Diary meets Indiana Jones?
I wish I could tell you. That's the hard part. We don't. There's something magical, and everybody says, "What's your bloomin' onion? What's your signature thing?" In our, I mean, we have a few items in our menu that are just outstanding that people crave, and we obviously see it in all our reviews.
For sure.
However, I think it's the combination of the bowl at our restaurant, the bowl experience. And we've tried, adding different things. And you see a lot of brands, everybody wants to add something. Sometimes it works. And like you said, innovation, sometimes it can work and create magic. You look at Chick-fil-A, they innovated and added a chicken to a sandwich for breakfast. Nobody was doing that, right? And so that's innovation that obviously exploded and took off and covers all their fixed costs before they even open up every day. Um, but we have, as a brand, probably over innovated, to your point, right? Like the problem with a founder and a creative mind is sometimes you get in their own way and you're constantly like, consistency is hard for a founder. It gets boring, right? Just consistently doing the same thing. And so you want to add this, change that, tweak that. Um, But I do see, now that you say that, there's an opportunity for us to take everything we're doing and maybe put it under the microscope and just say, how can we just make everything just a little better? Like you don't need to add stuff, but why don't we just take everything under the that we're currently doing and just say, let's make that better. Let's make the way we flow in the restaurant better. Let's make that seasoning better. Let's make the flavor profile better on this item. Reduce waste, whatever it may be, versus constantly adding. Yeah, I agree. You know,
I look, I
CEOs I
think
think are amazing for marketing and this and that. And they love them and something to talk about and blah 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 and PR. Really, it's a operational distraction beyond belief. I was talking to one of my operators today, and he reminded me, Chris. I asked him, Pat, why do you think we're doing so much better this year than we did last year? Why do you think we're up in sales and the industry's down and so on and so forth? He goes, Chris, remember last year how much stuff we were changing? And I was like, yeah, we were trying to pivot and change and this. He goes, that's a major distraction to operations. And every time you change something in operations, it throws them for a curveball. And they don't, when you're a small team, you can change quick, but when you get bigger, they can't adapt as fast. And now I get it. We've learned
well,
expensive learning lessons, remember?
oh, absolutely. It's I think that when I engage with a client, I think almost always they think that marketing is about me bolting things onto their business, right? Oh, we'll do this and we'll do that and we'll do this and we'll add this. When 99% of what we do is we strip out everything that is non-essential to the brand. Because there's this creep that happens over time. Um, I work with a client that's going to remain unnamed. That when we got together, they're in the quick service space, and they had a 50-item menu. And like, there's no such thing as a quick service restaurant that has a 50-item menu, but they have been around for 11 years. And they started with a 15-item menu, and then they did this LTO, and it went well, and people demanded it, so they added it. Then they tried a couple of other things, and they seemed remotely successful. And then the next thing you know, they're sitting on 50 items, and the whole concept is overwhelming. And to their point, and I think we see this a lot, they would argue, everything sells kind of well. But the question is like, what are you known for? What is the thing that people come to you for? Um, I would ask you this question because I think that from a marketer's perspective, it's something we all have to answer. Um, every business in the world has a job that it performs in the life of its guest. I owned a dive bar in Hollywood, and I would argue that it's not that we served food and beverage, it's that we were an antidote to loneliness for the transient kids that lived in Hollywood. My fine dining restaurant existed to help people celebrate. My fast casual was built around indulgence to make you feel good by doing something that wasn't necessarily terrible for you. And so like it fills jobs in people's lives. And when you look at Bolle over the course of the last several years, what is the job that you think it serves for the people that patronize it?
It's interesting. Great question. One is, what do you think it serves, and what do we think? And I think there's the discrepancy, right? Of
Sure.
what we think our mission is, and our mission is to fuel people to be their best. And it was always by great culture and great food that fueled you, that was incredibly flavorful, but also didn't give you the food coma and take you down. And we 100% gluten-free restaurant with great flavors. Um, but I'm wondering, and obviously we've done infinite research and studies and this and that, but to really dive deep down, I think what our guests say that we do the best is we give a great value. We give a lot of food for a good price point, and we do it with genuine hospitality. And, out of all of that, what do we get the most credit for? And here's the real key question that nobody understands. What do people know that they come to your brand for, or what do they not know? Right? Can you
Sure.
say why you go to that business or that restaurant? I mean, I sometimes can and sometimes I can't. I just know I like it and it resonates to me. Why does that brand come to top of mind versus another one? What about it?
Yeah, absolutely. How does it fit into your life? I think it is, there are all these questions that marketing is supposed to answer. Should this place exist? Is it for me? Right? There's no shortage of vegan and vegetarian concepts out there that should exist that probably won't get my money. Doesn't mean they shouldn't exist. It just means it's not for me. But to your point, I think the question that we fail to answer time and time again as an industry is, how does this fit into my life? Is this the place I go to meet people? Is this the place I go to feel good about the food that I eat? Is this the place I go when I want to celebrate? Is this the place I go when I want to indulge? Because I think that people need that now more than ever. When you look at the downturn in the industry, I think that the people that are thriving through frequency, not through new customer acquisition. And I think that frequency is almost exclusively rooted in the patron having a firm understanding of how you fit into their life, the job that you do in their life. Does that resonate with you? Was that part of the Bolle strategy?
100%. And I think one of my lessons that my father taught me real early on was the guest intent to return. There's nothing more powerful than the guest intent to return. If there's no intent to return in our business, you don't have a business.
I want to talk about 2020. So there was this quote that I found that you said, where is it? You said that it was a horrible but beautiful year. I would argue that most people only see the horror. And I think it's amazing that you see the beauty in it as well. What did that season in your life teach you about resilience and what actually matters in leadership?
I say I can break it up into two parts. The horror was because a I didn't have the fear of the death and all that. I think I was younger and so on and so forth. So that take that out, right? Take that whole COVID whatever off the table. Now let's talk about the business. Looked at it as we didn't have a Hail Mary. We didn't have something to come rescue us. We didn't know that the government was going to come do bailouts. We didn't know that they're going to open up. So you're sitting here looking at everything, your blood, sweat, and tears is just completely ripped away from you. And then I sat there, and the beauty of it was, but guess what? I got a God-given brain. I learned how to create a business. I got a beautiful family who's healthy, who's happy, and we can figure the rest out. And then the other beauty was the second part of the professional was we every day met and discussed everything. And we were radically transparent with the team with whatever knowledge we had, up, back, down, forward, had virtual meetings all the time. So our communication skills went up dramatically. And I always said, I'm going to make every decision and I'm going to think, what would Chris 10 years from now look back at this decision to? Not just in the here and now. What does 10 years from now Chris say to this decision? And in my book one day that's written about me, or I write, what is it going to be? And I remember one of the best things that we did, and I got this out of Truett Cathy from Chick-fil-A when they went through the crisis in the 1980s of some shape or form. I forget what it was, but he had to withhold everybody's pay. And while at Bolay, we never withheld, we just reduced everybody's on a pro rata share. We vowed that if we were to make it through and we were to make money again, we were going to pay everybody back. And I did. Pro rata share, everybody got back plus interest into their 401ks. And it was probably one of the more proud moments of my professional career, that we were able to do that. And then the other beautiful side of that I found was it cleared out the noise of our lives. My wife and I having dinner on our front porch together, kids, this magical time of reduction of all of the social kind of poles that we get pulled in, right? Kids' soccer games, this, that, dinners with the friends, charity events, travel, you name it. Like all that was just, now we started getting stir crazy, but there was a beauty in it that it just gave us all a moment to pause. Kind of like almost a meditation, right? Like a meditation, a life meditation. And so I look back, and the only thing I wish I didn't have to worry about taking care of the business and the safety and making decisions of the safety of the business at every time. That pressure of a CEO, the final buck stops at you. That pressure was so crock pot, boiling plate, whatever you want to say, hot, that to me was hard to make it through. But then the other aspect of it, of the beauty, um, was quite relaxing and nice. Interesting. I didn't know that quote was out there. See, always got to make sure you have good quotes.
Yeah,
Never say
for
something
sure.
stupid.
You mentioned like having a book and all of that. And I think that we're all thinking about legacy over time. And legacy can be a weight, and your father is an incredibly successful man, incredibly talented man. I don't think even he would argue luck plays a huge role in that, right? That like he and the Ron Shakes of the world, like there's just a level of success that is unnatural and only seen by a handful of people on the planet. And like growing up with that, in working alongside him, and knowing him on a personal level, and knowing him to be a human being, right? Because to other people he's an icon, or he's a figure, or he's this aspirational character, but to you he's like the guy hogging the bathroom. So because you see his humanity and you've seen his success, that level of success I would assume appears achievable, right? Whereas most people would say, well, that's good for him, but most of us aren't going to get there. How do you approach legacy through the lens of growing up with a man that achieved success that, like, at least in this industry, I'm not even going to guess what the statistic is, but it's like 1/10 of 1% actually achieve.
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think, you know, when you grow up with such a wonderful father, part of it is, that's your icon, that's your legend, that's your gold circle, gold star, right? So if you're a competitive person by your nature, what do you want to do? You want to beat that person, do better, emulate, but also do better. And um, I remember saying that to him one time, and he looked at me like, "What? You want to beat me?" And I was like, "Yeah, Dad." And guess what? And then I want my son to want to beat me. And then this legacy of us, the Gannons, we're just keep getting better and better and big, like constant improvement, right? And he's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I don't want to beat you in a negative way. I want to emulate. I want to grow. I want to learn off of you, and you be the springboard to me to go to the next chapter." And I would tell you, Josh, sometimes I think I got a little too wrapped up in it because we opened up Bolay, we opened up the second one within 8 months, and who does that? And the next year we open up two more. Then the next year we open up four. So for the first 5 years of Bolay, we literally doubled every year. One year we had 8 restaurants, we opened up eight the next year. Nobody does that. And even Outback didn't do that in their early days. I mean, we crushed every restaurant I've ever heard of. I've never heard of another corporately run, not franchise, corporate owned restaurant group that opened up that many restaurants out of the gate that early. And that could be wrong. And I hope someone's done better. And because of that, we made a lot of mistakes too, by the way, right? We did. So lesson learned. Don't grow so fast early on. And but I was so enamored with trying to beat Outback and beat Dad that I somehow just at some point realized, no, like this is my journey, my chapter. I don't have to have restaurants in 27 different countries. And I just want to have a great company, a big company. We're going to keep getting bigger and better, but we want to be great first. And whatever journey is our journey, it's our journey. It's not their journey. And it's different times. I mean, nowadays, the competitive nature of restaurant industry compared to back then, the legality and the headwinds and the this and that. So, um, yeah, great question. Great question. So it's fun.
Let's talk about the business of it, because it's if I was to articulate my career into three phases as a restaurateur, it was, oh shit, we need to make a lot of money. To, yeah, we're making a lot of money, but we're not keeping any of it. To, okay, now we're actually keeping some of the money and things are sustainable. I think revenue is always the first pillar, and then it's profitability, and then ultimately sustainability. Talk to me about your path from revenue into profitability?
Great question. I think when we first started the brand, it was nothing more than, and it wasn't even revenue, it was based on guests. All I cared about was how many people I could make happy. To the point where a lot of times everybody's like, well, what's your bottom line EBITDA, your percent, this and that? I kind of looked at him. I don't know. I should have known. Um, I was so focused on laser focused on the guest and the experience and how many more people we could serve and having come in. And then obviously you build more restaurants and you start getting competitive, and every banker starts having this cash on cash return and EBITDA and all your COGS and different percentage on the P&L, which is all extremely important, right? Because profit is a beautiful word, because profit means growth, right? Without profit, you can't grow. And so I learned that real
Sure.
quick. But you can get too wrapped up in that. You can get too wrapped up in the percentages and this and that, and forget the percentages come from more people walking through those doors. You try and price increase yourself, but you also, one of the things we also learned early on was you got to have a good model right out of the gate. And, good or bad, I think when we first started, we had incredible top line, but our bottom line percent was just okay. And I think that's because we went to market and we were significantly undercharging for what we were providing. We
Sure.
brought this Ferrari to the marketplace, but we were charging Ford prices. And I learned, I always thought, well, that's any business, right? That's Walmart, that's this, that. And one of the lessons learned, obviously, you still want to provide value. There's such an equation here of price value, what people get, what they don't get. But there's also the perception of the product if you don't charge enough for what you're giving. And I say that by, we were bringing this premium product, but not charging enough for it. And some people then, like when we are going to the higher end markets, were saying, well, what's wrong with this food? Doesn't
Right.
make sense. Like is it not good quality, not high level? And I'm like, huh? It threw me. I don't know. Still to this day, it's a head scratcher, right? And you just look at, some people have to have a higher price tag next to things to then put it in that category of quality, I guess.
Sure. Price is a story.
Price is a
If I
story.
price is a story. If I turned to you and I said, "Yo, man, I need some quick cash. You buy my Rolex," and you were like, "Yeah, for sure. How much do you want for it?" And I was like, $100. You'd be like, "There's no fucking way. I'm not gonna buy
It's
that thing.
broken.
That thing is
It's
right.
broken.
It's broken. It's fake. It's not true."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But if I was like $5,000, you'd be like, "Oh, it's a really good deal." Right? Because that watch probably costs 10 grand. So I'm getting it for 50% off. That's a good deal. It is, the the way I approach it always is around, it's not about price and it's not about value. It's about this price to value ratio, right? And it always needs to be in line because it's a story that you tell the consumer, right? And so, like, when you go to Louis Vuitton, like, if you went and it was built out like a garage, you would be like, these bags probably aren't worth that much, right? But Louis Vuitton doesn't sell bags, they sell luxury travel, right? And so the place looks like that. It feels like that. The bags feel like that. It's one of the things that I think you've done really well. Is I think that when you go into the restaurant, when you look at everything from cutlery to bowls to tables to chairs, it is a very succinct message, right? We could argue back and forth on whether you're happy about it today or not and how much of it you would
Yeah.
change.
Yeah.
But again, if we go back to the thesis, which is that customers crave consistency, and then we look at the lesson we just discussed, which is that, like, if the value equation is off, people get real suspicious real quick. One of the things that I think that Bolle has done exceptionally well is create that level of consistency. And I think that that's hard to do. And what it requires is focus, especially from founders, because as a visionary, all you do is have visions, right? Every idea you have is a great idea until it is either proven or disproven true. And every time you choose to do that, it comes at an associated cost. So I would ask you, how do you focus? How do you not get easily distracted? How do you keep the main thing the main thing?
That has been my Achilles heel, right? I think it's
Same,
the
same.
right. The unfortunately, as a founder, as a creative, as somebody who gets bored and loves new stuff, it's challenging, right? To be consistent and and not getting our own way. What made us great to start is hard to maintain. And the other part that, when you're competitive by nature, I think most successful business people, whether you're A student or C student, I think most founders and great successful people are C students. We just are ridiculously competitive and work hard. And, you know, that gets in the way though of never being satisfied, constantly thinking that we got to change something or tweak something. Um, but I think that one of the things that we have implemented recently over the past year, and it is given us a lot more stability with the team below as well, is an operating rhythm. We use EOS operating rhythm within the business,
Oh yeah.
and it has definitely put guardrails. It slowed down innovation. It has slowed down a few things, but we have slowed down to speed up. And I truly believe, and it was evident when one of my area leaders just today said, Chris, I think because we stopped making so many changes that that we've started to get consistent again in operational excellence. Again, I'm like, because we're not marketing more, we're actually marketing less, and our sales are going up. And it's just because we've upped our execution. And I think we have a lot more room to go though too. Because we're not a set it and forget it concept. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts to create that our menu every day. It's designed by some top. I mean, our chef is 2-star Michelin chef. Our original chef Martin Oswald, was written in a book Eat to Live by Joel Furman on reversing cancer. It's not these easy recipes. These are sophisticated recipes that offer many different steps to get right day in and day out. That's created by a high-end chef, executed by an incredible team member that is having to read and run this play. That these are complex plays. Sometimes that's why you look at NFL players. Sometimes you see coaches. What do? They make them just run the simple plays versus the complex plays. Well, we got some complex plays.
One last question for you. I don't think that they're successful people. I think they're successful habits. And I think that anyone can achieve the same level of success by just doing the things that successful people do. And so I would ask you, what should we steal from you? What are the tactics, the tools, the strategies, the best practices that have served you well that we should steal and internalize to benefit our lives?
For me, I think one of the things that everybody gives me the most credit for is I create fun. I find adventure fun in anything we do. And I think no matter what, even when you gotta peel an onion, there's a fun way to peel an onion. Let's make a competition at it. I'm like, this sucks. Let's do it the fun way. I'm always gonna, if I'm like, hey, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna be having fun doing it. And so I think that percolation kind of goes down. Now, how do you balance that with accountability and operational excellence? And that's the challenge, right? And so I've surrounded myself with incredible leaders and people. Our new COO, Shannon, is just unbelievable. Chef Robert, all of our area leaders. Our operational excellence has gone up because of the dedication, the focus to being consistent and finding great talent within an organization. And then let me be culture fun, come on down and have a good time. So yeah, that's a good question.